sound was not thunder, though some swore it rolled across the night sky like a storm. It was sharper, heavier, crueler. It was the crack of gunfire, and it often came from a place that looked like nothing more than an ordinary office building in Kampala. From the outside, the walls were plain. A stranger could pass by and think it was just another government office. But if you dared to stand near its doors, if you waited long enough, you would hear the screams. They bled through the walls, muffled, broken, terrified. Men begging for mercy, women calling out to God. The sound of whips striking skin, of boots smashing bone. This was not a prison, it was a factory of death. And it belonged to one man, Idi Amin. For 8 long years, Uganda lived under the shadow of this man. To call him a president would be a lie. To call him a leader would be too kind. He was a butcher, a predator, a strange mix of clown and monster who held a nation in his grip. He wore medals on his chest and absurd titles on his tongue. But behind his jokes and theatrics lay rivers of blood. Some people laughed at him, others feared him, and many never lived to tell their stories. But who was Idi Amin? And how did a man who started as a cook in the army rise to become one of the most infamous dictators in history? How did a man so ridiculous and bizarre become so dangerous? And how did he, after all his crimes, die peacefully in bed while hundreds of thousands of his victims rotted in mass graves? That is the story we are about to unravel. And once you step inside it, you can't look away. Idi Amin was not born into greatness. Around 1925, in a poor corner of northwestern Uganda, he came into the world with little more than his size. He was tall, broad, and frighteningly strong. But in every other sense, he was ordinary. He had almost no education. He struggled with reading and writing. He was not a man you would expect to rule a country. Yet there was something inside him, a hunger, not for knowledge, not for wisdom, but for power, for dominance, for control. That hunger would grow like a disease until it consumed everything. When Amin was a young man, he joined the British colonial army in 1946. But not as a fighter, not as a commander. He joined as an assistant cook. His hands were meant for chopping food, not holding rifles. But even then, people noticed his size. He was not just big, he was imposing. A man who could fill a room with his presence, even when he said nothing. Soon, boxing became his escape. He fought with raw strength and he fought to win. For 9 straight years, he held Uganda's light heavyweight title. The military took notice. A man like Amin was not meant to stay in the kitchen. He was a weapon waiting to be sharpened. And so he was moved up, step by step, until he became a soldier, a brutal one. He fought for the British in faraway lands, and his reputation grew. He was not known for a discipline or strategy. He was known for his fists, for his violence, for the way fear followed him like a shadow. When Uganda won independence in 1962, Amin was no longer just a soldier. He was a rising figure in the new Ugandan army. And soon, he would become the most dangerous ally a politician could have. Milton Obote was Uganda's prime minister. He was ambitious, and he needed someone loyal to keep the army on his side. Amin seemed perfect. He was strong, popular with soldiers, and willing to do what others would not. Together, Obote and Amin became a team, one with brains, the other with muscle. But loyalty has a strange way of twisting.
By 1966, Amin was the commander of the armed forces. The army followed him, admired him, feared him. And Obote, once his friend, began to see him as a threat. The more Obote tried to keep Amin in check, the more Amin dreamed of taking his place. And then, the moment came. It was January 25th, 1971. Obote was away in Singapore at a summit. Amin moved quickly. Tanks rolled into Kampala. Soldiers stormed key buildings. The radio crackled with a new message. Milton Obote was gone. Idi Amin was now the leader of Uganda. The people cheered. For a brief moment, Amin wore the mask of a humble soldier. He told the people he was not like the politicians. He promised peace, order, and elections. He staged a state funeral for a former king, a gesture that made him look noble, even kind. But the mask slipped faster than anyone expected, and when it did, the world saw the true face of Idi Amin. Uganda's nightmare began quietly. People started disappearing. First, it was those loyal to Obote, soldiers, officers, anyone who might fight against Amin. They were rounded up, executed, or tortured until they vanished. Then the list grew. Judges, professors, journalists, religious leaders. Anyone who dared to speak, to question, to criticize. Entire ethnic groups, especially the Acholi and Longo, were targeted with brutality. The State Research Bureau, Amin's secret police, became a name whispered in terror. The headquarters looked ordinary, but inside it was hell. People screamed through the night, never to be seen again. Some said Amin himself sometimes joined the torture. By the time the years rolled on, the numbers were staggering. Between 100,000 and 500,000 Ugandans were killed during his rule. Each life snuffed out not by war or famine, but by a man drunk on power. And yet, even as bodies piled up, Amin strutted across the world stage like a performer. He gave himself absurd titles. His Excellency President for Life, Field Marshal Alhaji Dr. Idi Amin Dada VC, DSO, MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, and conqueror of the British Empire and Africa in general and Uganda in particular. He mocked foreign leaders. He sent bizarre telegrams. Once, he even praised Adolf Hitler. The world watched with a mix of horror and disbelief. Was this man a dictator or a clown? Could someone so ridiculous really be so dangerous? The answer came in 1972. That year, Amin declared what he called an economic war. He ordered all Asians, mostly Indians and Pakistanis, to leave Uganda within 90 days. These families had built businesses, schools, and factories. They were the backbone of Uganda's economy. But Amin didn't care. He accused them of disloyalty, of greed. And so they were forced to abandon everything. The businesses were handed over to Amin's allies, men with no knowledge of how to run them. Within months, the economy collapsed, shops emptied, factories shut down, food became scarce. A country with potential was dragged into hunger and poverty, all because of one man's arrogance. Still, Amin laughed. He staged ridiculous stunts. He challenged Tanzania's president to a boxing match. He drove through Kampala in convoys, waving to cheering crowds forced to smile in fear. But beneath the madness, cracks were forming. And soon, those cracks would split his empire apart. By 1978, Idi Amin's empire was rotting from the inside. The shine of his promises had long worn off, leaving only the stench of fear and hunger. Uganda's economy had collapsed, markets stood empty, shelves barren, and families starved while Amin continued to throw lavish parties for his inner circle. Soldiers, once loyal, now whispered in secret. Their wages came late, their weapons were old, and their faith in the man who called himself Lord of all the beasts was fading fast. Mutinies broke out like sparks in dry grass. Assassination attempts grew bolder. Even his most trusted men could no longer be trusted. The walls were closing in. And so, like many dictators before him, Amin searched for a distraction. Something loud enough, violent enough, to silence the growing whispers of rebellion. He found it in war. That October, a small group of Ugandan soldiers mutinied and fled across the border into Tanzania. Most leaders would have seen this as an embarrassment, a sign of weakness, to be quietly managed. But Amin was not most leaders. He twisted the event into a weapon. He claimed Tanzania had sheltered his enemies. He thundered on radio broadcasts that Uganda had been insulted. And then he did the unthinkable. He ordered his army to cross the border. They stormed into Tanzania, into a stretch of land known as the Kagera Salient. What followed was not war, but butchery. Villages burned. Civilians were slaughtered. His men looted freely, dragging away anything of value. And then Amin, drunk on his own bravado, made a declaration. Kagera was no longer Tanzanian soil. It was Ugandan, his. It was the greatest mistake of his life. For years, Tanzania's President Julius Nyerere had tolerated Amin's madness. He had watched from across the border as Uganda sank deeper into chaos. But this was different. This was invasion. This was personal. On November 2nd, 1978, Nyerere declared war. What Amin expected was a small skirmish, a show of strength to frighten Tanzania back into silence. What he received was an avalanche. Tanzania mobilized quickly and with fury. The army swelled from 40,000 to more than 100,000. And they were not alone. Ugandan exiles, men and women who had fled Amin's terror, grieving families who had lost fathers, sons, daughters, now joined the fight. Together they formed the Uganda National Liberation Army, and with Tanzania's disciplined troops, they marched toward Kampala. Amin laughed at first. How could Tanzania defeat him? Did he not have powerful friends? Libya's dictator, Muammar Gaddafi, rushed to his aid, sending weapons, tanks, and even soldiers. To the outside world, it looked as though Amin might have a chance. But appearances can be deceiving. His army was not an army anymore. It was a mob in uniform, demoralized, hungry, corrupt. Many cared more about looting than fighting. Some deserted outright, abandoning their Libyan allies in the middle of battle. Meanwhile, the Tanzanians advanced with precision. They cut through forests, marched across swamps, and outmaneuvered Amin's troops again and again. With every battle lost, Amin's confidence cracked. His soldiers fled faster. His empire crumbled. By April 1979, the coalition reached Kampala. The capital trembled with expectation. Would Amin unleash one final act of madness? Would he touch the city, drown it in blood, refuse to fall quietly? On April 11th, the answer came. Tanzanian and Ugandan exile forces stormed the city. To everyone's shock, Amin was gone. The mighty butcher had slipped away in the night, leaving his people to face the reckoning without him. Crowds poured into the streets. Some wept openly. Others danced, sang, and raised their fists to the sky. After 8 years of terror, the nightmare was over. Idi Amin, The man who once claimed to conquer empires had vanished, but not captured. Amin fled by plane, taking wives, children, and wealth with him. He first landed in Libya, then moved to Iraq, and finally found sanctuary in Saudi Arabia. The Saudi royal family gave him asylum on one condition: stay out of politics. And so he did. He lived in comfort, a large house, servants, a monthly allowance. The man who had murdered hundreds of thousands died not by bullets, not by rope, but in a hospital bed. On August 16, 2003, Idi Amin's heart finally stopped. He escaped justice, but his shadow never left Uganda. The country he abandoned was shattered. The economy was in ruins. Families were torn apart. The scars of fear and trauma stretched deep into the nation's soul. Even after Amin, Uganda stumbled through years of chaos before Yoweri Museveni took power in 1986. For Tanzania, the war was a moment of pride, but it came at a cost. Their fragile economy suffered under the weight of the campaign. And yet, Amin's story remains not just a history lesson, but a warning. He fell not because his people rose, but because his arrogance pushed him into a war he could never win. Idi Amin escaped the courts of man, but he could not escape the judgment of history. His name is carved into infamy. His story is a reminder of how quickly power can corrupt, how fear can silence, and how even the most terrifying regimes can crumble. The butcher of Uganda may have died far from the land he destroyed, but the echo of his crimes still lingers, whispering a warning to the world: beware the man who smiles while holding a knife. I hope you enjoyed the story. Kindly subscribe for more. See you in my next story.